think we need to cut into the RBI governor.
Monetary policy change. Like other emerging markets, indeed even the developed countries, one can expect that there will be some changes in financial flows taking place in the world. But given that this first change is fully baked in, one doesn't expect from this direct policy interest rate change much of an effect that is already not factored in by the market.
I would add to that, but at the end of it, one cannot be completely confident of what happens. So we are prepared for any eventuality.
Kishore Vishwas from Business Economics. A number of stall projects are being restarted with the help of government and political intervention. And if these are being made, but the economic growth is not by that level as expected, so don't you think that it will create another problem of recovering the banking system? This is my first question. And second question, should I ask?
I'm not sure. Munir sir, would you like to respond to that question? I think the first step is to get the project finished. Many of these projects, a lot of investment has gone into them, and if the last mile something is missing, we should finish them. And then as they start producing, obviously they'll add to supply. But if the question is, aren't there areas of global oversupply today, for example in steel, and won't there be some difficulty in those areas? Yes, temporarily, but over time the economy has enormous infrastructure investments being contemplated, and so there will be a demand for steel, a demand for cement. We've already seen cement pick up in the last IIP numbers. So my sense is that we will be able to use a lot of what we produce. And so the first, the most important thing is to get the projects done.
Another question is that recently T. Rammohan has written an article, you have studied it, regarding infusion of capital. He is saying that it is not by that level as government is projecting. It is only 25,000 crores is enough per year. He just giving some logic. So do you have any estimate of the required infusion in public sector banks?
I think that the number of what is needed by the public sector banks depends on a variety of assumptions, and if you make different assumptions, you get different numbers. Because remember, a lot of the capital that the public sector banks are going to generate over time comes from their own profits. So a measure of their profitability will be important. Also, their capital needs depends on the growth of their assets. That's also an important factor into deciding how much. And of course, the size of the eventual NPAs and how that will be absorbed is another factor. So without knowing precisely what assumptions he's making, it would be hard for me to comment on his point. Remember also that the share that the government has to put in depends on the overall external capital that they need, also net of how much the government is going to bring down its stake in the public sector banks. So all these are inputs into that statement. But once you make the assumptions, the calculation is fairly straightforward.
Good evening, sir. My question is, can you please clarify your latest stand on NPA or bad loans, or in bank merger that has already been talked about? Some of the banks are going to merge. So NPA and merger of some banks that is already on the line.
On the NPA in banking sector, I think as we have been indicating for some time that because of a variety of reasons, including the slowdown in the economy which was being talked about, there are level of stress in the banking sector, and as a part of our regular supervisory cycle, and which also we indicated earlier that in last couple of months our team was engaged in completely looking at the the position in banking sector at one point of time. We have some good insight, and the data are being pooled and being analyzed, and then accordingly the future course of action would be further decided. Governor already indicated in the last monetary policy about the possible roadmap and the timeline by which we would like the banks to move in that direction. As far as merger is concerned, I don't know what kind of comments you are expecting from us. You know, these are the things which entities have to decide. It has to be driven by the certain business consideration, and it should bring value. That is how the merger and consolidation should take shape in the industry.
Sir, the thing is that you know that this state is severely suffered by the money fraud and something else like Ponzi scheme and others. What kind of measures the RBI is going to take, or if you have the effect of it?
Thanks, sir. As regards complaints which we receive about money being swindled by specific institutions, that's a process which in the last 2-3 years, a new process which is started that is paying off. It's the state level coordination committees that we have, which continuously monitors the compliance and other information that comes to our notice, and a necessary action is taken through the law enforcement authorities. So it's a continuous process, and it is already paying off, and maybe Mundra Sahib.
I'll just add, as Gandhi Sahib mentioned about the SLCC, but consequent upon the discussions which we held in SLCC and to further strengthen the forum, we are advised by our Kolkata colleagues that post that there is a subcommittee of SLCC has been formed, and this subcommittee is practically meeting every month, and there is a very proactive participation of the government, of the investigating authorities, police in this committee. So as a result, the whole reporting mechanism and follow-up mechanism wherever is needed is become quite efficient. So I think this is a major direction which has happened in this state, particularly in this area.
Hello, yeah, I'm from Reuters, Kolkata. Okay, is RBI planning to tighten the rules for debt restructuring for banks? Yes. And also, like, do you think it can affect like cleaning the bad assets, and if there is any meeting scheduled with the banks on Monday?
You had a question
yes,
also?
Are you looking at a review of SDR, given the fact that there are reports that many banks are using that to avoid higher provisioning? Are you looking at a review?
No. Look, we have spent much of the last few quarters creating a variety of bank powers to deal with stressed assets. SDR is just one of them. There's the 525 process. There's allowing takeover of the entire company by an external party. A whole lot of ways that banks can essentially deal with the stressed asset. Having given those powers, we are now looking at how those powers are implemented. And the idea being that these are meant not so much to postpone the day of reckoning, but to actually deal with the stressed asset in an effective way. And as we learn about the way they're being used, we will obviously have a dialogue with the banks. As Mundra Sahib pointed out, that dialogue is ongoing. And the idea is that we want to have a framework of how we restore health to the banking system's assets in an effective way over a defined period of time. As I said in the monetary policy review discussions, that we hope that by about March 2017, the entire process will be complete of restoring health, certainly to the banking assets that they're looking at.
Any meeting on Monday on this with the bank?
I don't want to. There's an ongoing dialogue. That's all I will say. There's an ongoing dialogue with the banks. We talk to them on a regular basis, and that dialogue is proceeding.
Mr. Rajan, I'm dependent on PGI. I'm just checking it from just what you say. If that be the case, the banks have a number of ways to deal with stress assets, and the idea is not to postpone the day of reckoning. Then why is the bank not be going to do anything as Mr. Vijay Mallya, and why is CBI has come in? Why CBI has to come in if banks have a number of
Look,
ways
I don't want to comment on specific cases. I think if you look at the gamut of situations where the banks have taken action, yes, in some cases the banks have been a little late. But in many cases where they have attempted to take action, it is not the fault of the banks that action has not materialized. There have been many impediments to their actually realizing the actions. More generally, I would say that the ability to use the system to impede action has been fairly strong in the hands of large promoters. And over time, we need to rectify the balance so that the banks have a greater ability to recover their money than be held up by various aspects of the system. And I think that's what I was referring to earlier, that we've given them various new powers which can allow them to deal with some of the impediments in the system and accelerate the process of recovering their assets.
Governor, Astojip from Economic Times. There are divergent views are coming from the global market. On the one hand, the trade is expedited ECB on the other hand is going down slow. So there will be volatility in the market. How do you plan to curb this volatility?
See, our intent is not to curb all volatility. I mean, some volatility will emerge because of market forces, and we're seeing some play out even on a day-to-day basis nowadays. I think some of the volatility that you see in markets is because of anticipation, certainly of the Fed move, but perhaps also of the divergence, though the last ECB move suggested the divergence would be less than people anticipated. I think going forward, the best defense against global volatility is sound domestic policies. So in other words, don't worry so much about what's happening outside, but make sure that what you're doing inside is sensible and creates the conditions for strong and sustainable growth. And I think all of us should be working along those dimensions to create the conditions for strong and sustainable growth, and that's what at the RBI we're totally focused on.
Governor, last week the SBI chairman said that the RBI's plan to calculate base rate on marginal pricing method won't work in its draft form. So they need some changes. And also repo rate is a blood pool to decide base rate. So what are your comments on that?
I think we've been in discussion with all the banks. We've taken their views into account. And having taken their views into account, we've formulated the regulation, which should be out very, very shortly. So I think the concerns of each bank, including SBI, have been heard, and wherever those concerns are legitimate, we have made adjustments. The final structure that will come out, I think, will not be onerous on the banks. I have a strong sense that some of the most important concerns have been dealt with.
Mr. Rajan, this from Times of India. One question, just discussed earlier. Last week, SBI chairman was there and he said that shadow banking is a real threat. So as you said that SLCC is on for last 3-4 years, but there are a lot of loopholes in legality between regulators and these things. Are you working on that?
No, the SLCC is created precisely to deal with the loopholes, and really it's been strongly functional, I would say, over the last year and a half. That it's picked up steam, it's meeting more regularly, the subcommittee of the SLCC has been formed. So the actions that you should be monitoring of the SLCC are more in the recent past. And the primary idea is to get all the regulators in the same forum, along with the government, along with law enforcement agencies, so that we can find out and act quickly in areas where there are concerns. So I think this is what was intended, and it is actually functioning right now.
Dr. Rajan, this is Shumanta from Hindustan Times. Will you kindly throw some light on the discussion with Dr. Amit Mitra last evening? And my second question is that, considering that the West Bengal government has borrowed near about 1 lakh crore in the last exactly 4 years, 6 months from the open market to the RBI window, what kind of stress the state finance would be in a few years, especially between 2017 and 2022?
So I'll allow Mr. Khan to speak on. Could you just repeat the question for Mr. Khan's this thing?
Considering that West Bengal government has borrowed near about 1 lakh crore from the open market to the RBI window in exactly 4 years, 6 months, what kind of stress the state economic, state finance will be in the next few years, especially between 2017 and 2022?
No, there are few states where there are stress in terms of their fiscal position. I think the state government is taking step, and if I understand correctly, their revenue augmenting capacity has also improved in the recent past. And once they should be in a position to handle, but if there are issues, they will probably cut down future borrowings. And overall, what we are trying to do from our side is to see that the borrowing as smooth as possible and they borrow at an efficient rate, not at very high rate. But beyond that, each state is subject to fiscal responsibility regulations. I think they are working on that direction. So, other questions?
What about your
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that. Look, I can't go into the details of the meeting, but we talked about the state and some of the challenges that he was addressing, and some of the ways that we could contribute to supporting the state. So it was a very, very profitable and useful meeting.
Was there any solution to the challenges that you mentioned?
Of course. There are always solutions.
Sir, you mentioned, this is Anik from Wings, you mentioned that you're pretty much certain that the Fed is going to increase interest rate next week. What kind of increase has the market already factored in?
Well, we don't have any independent assessment, but looking at the market probabilities, our sense is 70 to 75% probabilities seem to be of the Fed increase. I also think the Fed has prepared the way fairly carefully for an increase, so likely at this point they will go ahead. At least that is our betting.
And to what extent do you think what kind of increase has already been factored in?
I don't know how much it would be. My guess is not more than 25 basis points, but it could be anywhere between 0 and 25, probably between 1 and 25.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.